We're going to do some Digistruct Peak builds. I've got several coming. And yeah, so I'm going to do two Jakobs Allegiance builds here. I'm going to do one with Zer0 through Digistruct Peak, and I'm going to do one with Axton through the run up to Captain Flynt, and we'll fight Pete at the end of both of those. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. Amigo Sincero, this is just the best Jakobs sniper in the game. Now, if you don't have the Lilith DLC, stuff like the Muck-a-Muck, the Skull Masher can be decent alternatives. Obviously, nothing is going to match the Amigo Sincero for single shot damage. The Hot Mama is also good. It can get, you know, a fire boost from a Firebone of the Ancients, which is really nice. The Twister, this is just a really excellent shotgun. It has good synergy with multiple characters. It does benefit from grenade splash damage bonuses, so it's good for Axton. It's just a really great shotgun. The Slag Pimp for slagging. Yeah, whenever I do Allegiance builds, I will allow stuff like that and shields and other stuff that's not part of that Allegiance. I would consider that more of a challenge build, a build that uses only gear from that manufacturer. These are just supposed to show how strong Allegiance builds can be even on OP10, because as we all know, people think that a lot of stuff like that won't work at this difficulty. And then the Becca, obviously this is just a really excellent assault rifle. For Digistruct Peak, the enemies here are very tough, so you are going to need high-end gear to deal with them more easily if you're not using something like the B-Shield. Now honestly, the Twister and the Becca are both pretty hard to get, so if you don't have these, you can just run like a quad or a striker in place of the Twister. You could run the M2828 Thompson in place of the Becca. I covered that, and it's better than you think. If you want to check that out, it is very, very good. And the thing is, we can't use velocity because it would hurt the Twister and the Becca. So if you drop the Twister and the Becca for a quad and, you know, a Thompson, then you can just fully spec into velocity and they will perform very, very comparably. Blockade is just my favorite shield. There is the Rough Rider, which is a Jakobs shield, but for actual gameplay, it's not very good. Although I do use it during the Pete kill just for a little bit extra challenge. I don't use the B shield, because I do like to show that even the raid bosses can be done with kind of silly stuff like that. Longbow Slag Transfusion, we'll need this to stay, to keep our health up because Zer0 does not have good healing. Legendary Sniper, which fortunately is a Jakobs class mod, so that's pretty cool. You can see I am using a level 62 version here. This is because it provides much lower shield reduction, but gives you pretty similar damage. So level 62 is the earliest you can get this from tubby enemies. And then the Jakobs Allegiance Relic. Not one of the better Allegiance Relics in my opinion, but it is viable. It can only roll with recoil reduction, magazine size, and accuracy recovery, so I feel like this is the best version of it. And because Jakobs are non-elemental, most of them, they can't get an element matching bonus, so it would have been really nice if they had a damage boost on their Allegiance Relic. But since it doesn't, you can kind of make up for that by just using the most damaging Jakobs weapons, and it's still pretty good. There are actually two fire Jakobs weapons, the Hot Mama and the Greed, so you could use those with a Firebone, and that would be a semi-Jakobs Allegiance build. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the skills, and I will mention where to get this gear during the gameplay. Headshot, just really good crit damage. Killer, this is just an excellent kill skill. It'll give us good reload speed and crit damage after we kill an enemy. Bore, it's Bore, you just pretty much always want to take it. One shot, one kill at 10 points. This will be excellent for the Amigo Sincero and the Twister to give them great one shot, one kill potential, and it'll be good for the Becca, although not as good. And then I put 1 point in Precision just to activate the class mod, 4 points in Kill Confirmed for 9 total points. This is actually a significant damage bonus when you can take advantage of it. You won't always be able to, but especially when you're in Deception, you kind of have time to get stacks, so it has a nice little synergy like that. So, like, you shouldn't play it and, like, wait to shoot an enemy when you have max stacks. You should just naturally take advantage of it during gameplay when you have the opportunity. At 1 with the gun and Critical Ascension, since I am using the Amigo Sincero, will be really nice. Like I said, make sure not to spec into Velocity because it will hurt the Twister and the Becca. More so the Becca. I'm actually not sure if it hurts the Twister. I haven't tested that myself, but I've seen people say that, and it makes sense because it would speed up the projectiles. But yeah, if you're using a quad and like a Thompson in place, you can just move points out of Kill Confirmed and Precision to finish out Velocity, which maxed out, it would make the quad and the Thompson perform very closely to these harder to get weapons. Fast Hands, this is just so good for reload speed and swap speed. Ambush, you'll get this always coming out of Deception. Deathmark is obviously really good. You've got to be making good use of this if you want to get the most out of Zer0. Rising Shot, the gun damage bonuses are multiplicative, which is really nice. And then Two Fang. So people typically don't mix snipers and guns with Zer0, but there's no reason you can't do that. Obviously, you have the issue of you won't be able to stack critical ascension the whole time, or you will be using Two Fang on a sniper, which I personally don't like and most people don't like. But the thing is, whenever we're dealing with a strong target, we can just rely on the Amigo Sincero and stack critical ascension, like Dukino's mom, for example. And then during the rest of the game, we can just play normally and just play it by ear and swap around. So we'll get access to both of those benefits. So it'll work just fine, you'll see that. I've also wanted to do more sniper content because, again, people have a perception that sniping is bad in OP10, and that is just not true at all. I'm actually working on a full Sniper Zer0 guide. I've got a bunch of content coming, and you'll see, Zer0 can snipe the peak pretty easily. And whenever you're sniping as part of just an overall build, the ammo consumption is not a problem at all. I'll be doing plenty more sniper content, and I will continue to prove that sniping is incredibly good on OP10. But anyway, Innervate, this is good for healing and movement speed and deception. Two Fang is a really good skill. Like I said, I don't like it with sniper rifles, but it's actually not too bad with the Amigo Sincero, and it'll really benefit the Twister and the Becca. Then Death Blossom, this is just so good, being able to death mark up to 5 enemies at a time in deception, or just throwing all of them on a single enemy and you have a pretty good chance to slag them. Killing Blow, this is actually really good for finishing off weak mobs, and the sound is just super satisfying. Then Grim and Follow Through, these are just excellent kill skills. Grim is really good for your survivability. Survivability for Zer0, he relies a lot on positioning and just killing enemies before they can kill him, so Grim can help get our shield up, so that's nice. Follow Through, the movement speed is also nice to help us position better. And then Execute, I take it just because it's good to close distance, so it's really nice for that. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get into the peak run here. Alright, and here we are with the gameplay. Like I said, I did want to do Digistruct Peak here. I'm not always going to make it a priority to do Digistruct Peak, but I did want to do some builds on here because Digistruct Peak is very, very difficult. It's not a raid boss, but it is absolutely raid level content, and in my opinion is actually harder than most of the raid bosses. The enemies here, there's just an abundance of very tanky enemies and just a lot of difficult things to deal with. The enemies here have more health than their non-Digipeak counterparts. Scorch, for example, has about 4 times more health here. Oh, by the way, watch what I do to this skag here. You can yeet them into the abyss. So that's a good way to save ammo for a purely sniper-focused Zer0, is you can lure troublesome enemies to the edge and then knock them into the abyss. It's a lot of fun, too. But yeah, I did want to do some builds that would be good here. I'm going to do at least a couple for Zer0, Axton, and Mai. I think I've got 3 for Zer0 total, counting the Sniper Zer0 guide, and then 2 for Mai and 2 for Axton. But yeah, Scorch, for example, has 4 times more health. About 4 times more health, I think. For example, a Grenadier Axton build can kill regular Scorch in about 7 fastballs, but it took like 26, I think, to kill Digipeak Scorch. So enemies here are very tanky, and really only the best of the best builds can work here. Basically, if your build can beat Digipeak, it is a really, really good build. And it's going to be very good for non-Digipeak content, because Digistruct Peak is so much harder than the rest of the game. Any build that's good here is going to be good for bossing and mobbing in other parts of the game. Now, the Becca is really, really good if you can get all the projectiles to land. If you saw that M2828 Thumpson video, it also performs really excellently on Zer0, and it will have the advantage if you're not able to consistently land multiple pellets with the Becca. See, here's what I mean. There's just so many enemies on Digipeak that are really tanky, and then you've got enemies like this who are resistant to slag, or who cannot be slagged at all, which is just bad game design in my opinion. That's your best opportunity to burst them down, is when they do that attack. So I was really trying to focus and take them out. I mean, it would actually be okay to have slag-resistant enemies as long as their health was reduced to compensate, because then it could be, you know, some enemy variety and stuff. And I think Gearbox, I want to say somewhere that they said they did reduce the health of the slag enemies, but obviously they didn't do it enough. Like again, it's okay to have some enemies who can't be slagged to make them a little bit more threatening and to make them a little bit more tanky. The problem is just the degree to which they did it. Not only can they not be slagged, but they also have a lot of health. Super badass surveyors, super annoying, man. This is another tough thing about the peak. Fortunately, these guys will often just kill themselves. Like, you'll see this guy flies off, and then he just blows up. So I don't know what happened there, but thanks. But finally, this guy comes over here, and I'm able to take him out quickly with the Amigo Sincero. So again, when they do that attack, that's your best opportunity to burst them down. Now, with Surveyors, you can try to take them out before they heal the enemies on DigiPeak, or you can weaken enemies to lure the Surveyors over there to take them out, right? So like I said, there's a ton of enemies you have to flank to crit on the peak. Obviously, it's designed with multiplayer in mind, so again, only the best of the best builds are going to be good here. And, you know, if you can do the peak, you're going to be able to do non-peak content for sure. So then, like these guys, you have to flank them to crit them, but they don't have much health, so I'm okay with that. It's just the degree to which some of these enemies have too much health and have to be flanked is kind of annoying. Which again is a vestige of it being designed for multiplayer. But, you know, if you're a solo player, why not just not spawn so many or something? I think that would have been better. These guys are a bit hard to crit because they do cover their face. So again, enemies on DigiPeak have more health than non-DigiPeak enemies. I'm pretty sure that even goes for mobs. I think any enemy here who has Digistruct Peak in its name has more health. I might be wrong about that. I know the bosses for sure do, but it also feels like the mobs do. Another factor is the fact that you cannot gain an element matching bonus against these enemies. These marauders, these maniacs, they are not real flesh enemies. So if you shoot them with fire, you don't gain an element matching bonus. So that indirectly makes them tankier right away, right? I really dislike how Gearbox made the element matching system so important, and then they do so much stuff like that to mess with it. Like, there's so many enemies in the game who have weird little nuances about what elements are best to use on them, so just kind of weird. But yeah, the Twister, a really excellent shotgun, the Becca is a really excellent assault rifle. If you, like I said, if you can't get them, then the Thompson and the Quad or the Striker would be good as well. Oh, and also, like the Saturns, they're called Saturn 2.0 or something, so I'm pretty sure they have more health than regular Saturn. And like the Boneheads are called Bonehead 3.0, I think, which is a reference to the fact that they're the third set of Boneheads. So the Scorches, again, I'm just getting at that how tanky they are. The Scorches are very tanky, and you have to flank them to crit them. For Zer0, you basically just, if you're a solo player, you just wait for Deception, get your Deception, and then try to line up either a bore shot if they're on top of each other, or you just try to deal as much damage as you can on their crit spot with a high damage weapon like the Amigo Sincero. Again, normal Scorch would have went down way faster. These enemies are just really, really tanky. I do think Digistruct Peak is overtuned. Obviously, it needs to be really tough. It's supposed to be like the hardest part of the game. So maybe giving the bosses and enemies double health would be okay, but 4 times is just kind of ridiculous. And it may not be exactly that, but like I said, it took almost 4 times as many fastballs to kill the Scorch. So they're just ridiculously tanky. I don't use the B-Shield at all in this run, by the way. So I'm gonna, for the sake of brevity, I'm speeding up this part. So no B-Shield, and no B-Shield, no Grog Nozzle for these runs. I just use the Becca, since it's really ammo efficient, and I just try to get my crits in, and then I backpedal and just try to stay away from them. So I made a mistake there, and I got downed. But fortunately, I got the good spawn where you can get second wins. For Dukino's mom, if you get the spawn that has no minions, you have to be super careful and just hug the rock face. Don't take any unnecessary risks like I am here. I'm playing very risky because I know I can get second wins, so I'm just trying to hurry up and take her out. But those shock balls are super, super dangerous, and again, Gearbox, the Transformer would have been a good option here, but over damage will actually be subtracted from your health, meaning that if a shock attack does more damage than the shield capacity, you lose it from your health. So that would have been a really nice shield for this sequence specifically, but, you know, kind of a dick move by Gearbox there. And like I said, I was playing really aggressively here because I knew I had access to second wins, but I go ahead and take him out. And the Becca, I was using it at first again because it is so ammo efficient. Here's the thing, like, Digistruct Peak, again, it's one of the toughest things in the entire series. And part of the reason is you start with Dukino's mom during this section, so she can just burn through all the ammo for your best weapons if you're not careful, and then you'll really struggle for the Black Queens and the Bonehead section. sections. Again, the Black Queens can spawn immediately, but I got the spawn here where you have to fight a bunch of enemies first. And yeah, like I said, I've got so many DigiPeak builds coming. Like I said, really, only really good builds will work here. There are a lot of builds that will be good for the rest of the game, for the non-raid content, that won't be good for DigiPeak. So I'm not going to always put this restriction on myself that a build has to be able to do DigiPeak, because there are some fun off-meta builds that will be good, again, for most of the game, but just not here specifically. But I am going to do a little Digistruct Peak tour on my channel, a little Digistruct Peak arc, if you will. And we're going to do several builds that are good here. Go ahead and take that guy out. Some of these enemies can be hard to snipe. If you're playing just typical Sniper Zer0, you can burst down the Black Queens really quickly with the Lauda. If you kill them super quickly, you can prevent them from spawning minions. Most of the time, that's not going to be possible, unless you're, using the B-Shield or something. For a lot of these builds, I'm not going to use the B-Shield. I'm going to do at least one run with Axton and Ma that don't use the B-Shield on here as well. But then after that, because I've already done several runs here. I've got many runs, like 6, I think. And I wanted to get at least one run with each of the characters I play, Axton, Zer0, and Ma, that does not use the B-Shield on the Peak. For the most of the Peak, you don't need it. It's really just Dukino's mom and the double Saturns. And even then, you still can kill them without it, and you'll see that in those other build videos. But for the sake of brevity and the sake of not taking too much time here, you will, for most builds, want to throw on the B-Shield to deal with Dukino's mom and the double Saturns. But again, there's just so many enemies you have to flank to crit. For Zer0, a lot of the time, if you're a solo player, you're just waiting for your deception so you can try to get that big burst damage off on these super tanky enemies. Obviously, if you're in multiplayer, it adds an element of strategy because you can work together with your teammates to flank the enemies, and that is cool, but it's very punishing for solo players. You end up having to rely on your action skill. I mean, every character has a way to deal with them, but it's just a bit excessive. Like overall, I do really like Digistruct Peak. It is a really nice challenge to try to come up with builds that can deal with it, but there are definitely overtuned things on it. For the Axton build, I had to get pretty creative with some of these builds to beat this content without using stuff like the B-Shield or the Grog Nozzle, and that was fun, although I do feel it's a bit too limiting. I mean, sometimes it's just hard to hit a good balance between challenging but not too limiting, and for the most part, Digistruct Peak, they do a pretty good job. Like I said, my main issue is just how tanky some of the enemies are, and the fact that you have to shoot them in the ass to crit them so frequently. And then really just like the Saturns and the Dukino's mom. If you took out the double Saturns and Dukino's mom, I would really enjoy this. They're like the worst parts of it for sure. Another thing is, apparently Gearbox lowered some of the drop rates of the bosses here, which is like, wow. It's just like Gearbox has so many things they do like that is like actively malicious to their players. Like again, this is really difficult content. Why wouldn't you increase the drop rates for the bosses here, right? Like that's what you'd think. Because some of these drops aren't even guaranteed to drop on level. Like I've got several Bone Shredders here, but I've not kept a single one because they're either always non-elemental or below my level. So that's just such asshole game design, man. I'm pretty sure they also they aren't guaranteed to spawn with an accessory, which non-unique purple weapons are guaranteed to spawn with an accessory, but then for some reason, something like the Bone Shredder isn't. I'm 99% sure, I might be wrong about that. Yeah, but where to get this gear? The Twister obviously drops from O. The Becca you need to farm tubby enemies for, and the Amigo Sincero drops from, it's a quest reward for completing BFFFs at the end of the Commander Lilith DLC. The reason I don't spend a lot of time talking about where to get the gear is because you can always just look it up on Loot Lemon. They have everything you would ever need to know there. And plus just telling you the boss that drops it, you still don't really know where that is, and you still will have to look it up and stuff. And I think most people already know, so if in every single video I show like the path to get every single piece of gear, I just think that's it'll be too much dead weight for the video because it won't be useful to most people. And then the people who do need to know it can always just look it up on Loot Lemon. So this section can be pretty tough. You want to, if you get Constructor version 3, they're very tanky, so they can be really hard to take out for less damage-oriented characters than Zer0. Fortunately, he can take them out pretty quickly with the sniper damage and stuff, but this section can be really tricky. This sequence is probably the hardest part of the peak, in my opinion. The sequence from the Doc Mercies to the Assassins, where all the Assassins spawn. I mean, Dukino's mom is really hard too. So I don't know, it's hard to say, but this section is definitely tough. I think I die the most in the Bandits arena, or the Assassins arena, which we're almost up here too. But yeah, guys, if you can't get a Twister or a Becca, then a Quad and a Thumpson would work really well too. Again, because you would need to move points into velocity to help make up the difference, and it would be very good. But Zer0 is definitely my favorite character to run the peak with, just because he has a ton of damage, he has a lot of options. But yeah, like I said, I'm working on that Sniper Zer0 guide. I've got 2 Axton builds coming for the peak, I've got 2 My builds coming for the peak. So I get the spawn here where 2 of the Assassins spawn. They can be really hard to snipe, especially Roof. I swear it feels like his hitboxes are messed up a little bit, because I even slowed down the footage, and it really looked like I was critting him sometimes and it wasn't counting. So this section can be very, very difficult. But the good news is, if you make it past here, you're usually gonna win. Now, still be careful, it's still Digistruct Peak, it's still dangerous, so don't get overconfident. But I would say 90% of the time that I succeed here, I end up beating the peak. It's pretty important to try to kill these guys quickly, because as more enemies spawn, you can it can just become really, really difficult to deal with the enemies here. You want to run around, make sure you're making use of the cover here. This pipe is a decent option for cover, but you're not perfectly safe here. And see, enemies can throw grenades, they can fly over here, and worst of all, some enemies can trap you here. Some of them will follow you over here and box you in right here, and that is basically a death sentence if you're not prepared to get a second wind. So this section can be very, very tricky. Surveyors, they're just so annoying. They're not even hard. They just waste time, and they're just, like I said, just annoying to deal with. So, kind of wish that they had not allowed so many to spawn. There's also a spawn with the double scorches, where they can spawn with 6 surveyors. I mean, what the hell, Gearbox? That is like that's what I mean by malicious game design. Because again, they're not even challenging, they're literally just annoying time wasters. And the super badass ones are pretty tough because they're so tanky and they actually can do pretty good damage. So Digistruct Peak is partially luck based depending on what spawns you get. You can get a spawn where all 4 assassins spawn at once, which can be really tricky to deal with. So see, here's what I mean. Sometimes they'll follow you and box you in right here. For some reason, they just stopped attacking. Oh, and see, freaking my Amigo Sincero wasn't going through. But oftentimes they'll box you in right here, and it'll be very hard to take them out without dying. Another thing is, if you throw grenades here, be really careful, because you don't want to hit the wall and down yourself. So I would actually... Oh, got a dog drop, not a very good one though. Oh, I need to cover that weapon. That's a really, really great weapon too. But yeah, guys, sorry about the lack of uploads recently. I've just had some IRL stuff going on, and my monetization will not go through on YouTube. My AdSense application keeps getting rejected, and I've tried a bunch of troubleshooting, and nothing will work. You can't get in touch with anyone. The email they send, it doesn't tell me why it gets rejected. It just says, make sure you're following AdSense policies, which I am. And it says something like, we can't answer questions about specific inquiries. And then I also chatted with the quote-unquote support bot on YouTube, and it sucks ass, and it just tells you the same thing. So I followed a bunch of guides trying to figure something out, and the last thing the support bot told me was that I had to wait 21 days to apply again. However, then the option reappeared, so I reapplied again, and now I've been under review for like 4 or 5 days. So maybe it'll succeed, or maybe I'll end up getting rejected again. And then it seems like if I do get rejected again, my only option is to bug YouTube support on Twitter, from what I've seen. So hopefully this one gets accepted. I've been working on a lot of content. Like I said, I do have a lot of content coming. But the AdSense stuff is really annoying me and kind of sapping my motivation to make videos. But yeah, as far as gameplay, there's not much to talk about. You can just see I'm just flanking the enemies that I need to crit them with the Amigo Sincero. I yeet troublesome enemies off the map. Use the Becca whenever I can maintain the proper distance with it. Use the Twister when enemies get close. So it's a pretty well-rounded build. You know, OP10 is all about proper building, and you want to make sure you have options to cover everything you need. I've been visiting the Borderlands 2 subreddit recently because I'm a moron, and there's just so much bad misinformation and horrible takes on that subreddit. This community is just plagued with misinformation and bad takes. The main thing is, like, the Borderlands 2 subreddit is just really depressing because it's like half of the posts are like a screenshot or a picture of a TV of like a Herald drop or a sham. Which I get it, you're new to the game and you hear about those things, so you get excited when you find it, whatever, that's fine. But then like half the posts are just people bitching about the game being too hard, and about how badly balanced the game is. OP10 is only badly balanced if you operate from the assumption that the hardest optional content, the hardest optional difficulty, should be balanced so that low and average skill players can easily clear it, which is just insane. By the way, you can bore Saturn pretty easily with Zer0, you don't even need the B-Shield. You want to aim for the turrets to bore them, and also if you can line them up, that works really well too. Like, people praise the pre-sequel for being well balanced at max difficulty. It's horribly balanced. The pre-sequel is only well balanced if you operate from the assumption, again, that the hardest difficulty should be balanced for low skill players. Like, I thought maybe I was being too harsh, because I hadn't played it in a while. So I downloaded a level 70 save, and I just played around a bit. I unequipped my class mod and my Oz kit, and I didn't let myself match elements, and enemies were just dropping like flies. I wasn't having to use a proper build. I wasn't having to think about how to use my weapon slots, nothing. The Borderlands community, apparently that is the experience they want. They want the hardest difficulty to be balanced that way. Killer 6 is one of these people too. I don't have a problem with the guy, but he is one of these people who seems to force himself to play on OP10 even though he doesn't like it, and then just complains about it being too hard. I don't understand for those players why they couldn't just play at level 80 and then leave OP10 for people like me who enjoyed it, because what they ended up doing is bitching about it so much that they got, you know, the next Borderlands games made super easy, so that they get the experience they want, but players like me have no upward difficulty to move to play on, so it's just really frustrating. I'm gonna go in more depth on my thoughts on this whenever I release that OP10 challenge run with no slag and no red text gear, so gear up for that. I'm probably not going to be as nice in that video as I usually am towards those types of players. That's probably gonna piss some people off, but I don't really give a shit. I'll probably reference some of the stupid comments on the Borderlands 2 subreddit as well. There's just so much misinformation about this game, man. Like, I don't know why this community has become this way, but if you compare to other communities, the difference is night and day between how people react to these kinds of things. But anyway, I should probably stop bitching about that, and I'll save my thoughts for that challenge run video. Another thing to worry about with surveyors is they can actually shoot you when they're spawning in, whenever you still can't shoot them. So be really careful about that. Oh, I mentioned Killer 6, by the way, because somebody mentioned my content to him. Killer 6 said that, you know, you always have to use a Moxie weapon to survive on OP10. I saw somebody recommend my content to him, and then he said that the first video he clicked on, I was using a Ruby in, which is incredibly unlikely. I used it in that Melee Zer0 guide. It's incredibly unlikely that he picked that video at random. Almost certainly, people like Killer 6 say they want to see stuff like that, like people doing the game without, you know, Moxie weapons. But then you try to show them, and like he cherry picks the one example of where I did use it. You know, if he truly wanted to see people doing it without Moxie weapons, he could have looked at any of my other videos. But the point for people like him is not that they're not engaging in good faith. They don't genuinely want to see that it's possible to play without that stuff. Again, I don't have a problem with the guy or anything, but if people are going to be dishonest, that kind of irritates me. Again, I'll stop talking about that so much. I'm going to talk about this more in that challenge run. But alright, we're almost to the binary boss here. We need, I think this is, we got this guy and then one surveyor to take out. Again, these guys can be kind of hard to crit. The super badass surveyors are just so tanky, man. They're way too tanky. And that's another thing. I'm not saying that OP levels are perfect. I criticize them all the time. And I know you guys get tired of hearing me say that, but if I don't say that, then I'll get a bunch of comments saying, oh yeah, you just think OP levels are perfectly balanced. I would literally change hundreds of things about this game if I could, guys. But that's neither here nor there. So you can see you can bore him really easily. I probably should have started with the Twister, that's why I end up killing him with. He can be pretty tough. If you're not playing Zer0 and you can't instantly bore him, make sure to prioritize staying alive here, because he can end up flanking you and he can take you out. He's got some attacks that can also find you even if you're in cover. So just be careful. But you see we go ahead and take him out with the Twister there with the bore kill. And just showing the gear and spec here. And then we'll move on to the Pyro P kill. Oh, all I got was a storm, man. Like, the pearlescents are generally better than people think, but they basically every single pearlescent should be a top tier weapon for all characters. And that's really only true for like the Becca and the Butcher. And then a lot of the other good ones, they're good, but again, it's just like they should be so good that they excel on most characters in most situations. So while pearls are definitely better than people think, most of them aren't as good as they should be, in my opinion. But anyway, here we are with the Pete run. I'm doing kind of an off-meta thing here with the Amigo Sincero and a Rough Rider, because I do like to show that these raids just are nowhere near as hard as this community makes them out to be. You can do silly stuff like this. I've done how many different challenge runs? I've beat multiple raid bosses with OP0 gear, with non-unique gear. I've done a lot of silly stuff with the dragons in that one farming video. And I only play half the characters as well. If I played all the characters, I could do even more. I do eventually want to branch out, but just haven't really, like, there's just so much other content I want to make first. But yeah, obviously the Amigo Sincero was a good choice for Pete because he does, it can bypass his shield, and then he'll never do the double Nova, so that's really nice. If you're using a normal shield, like obviously you can get one that has an elemental immunity, either fire or corrosive, and then you'll be able to block every other Nova. I was just doing kind of a meme build with the Rough Rider here. Although, I will benefit from Fearless with the Rough Rider at least. Which maybe I forgot to spec into it because Fearless is not showing up on my skill list there. Huh. Fearless does show up there, doesn't it? Man, I can't remember actually. I guess I'll see after I finish this kill. But yeah, I've done a lot of silly stuff like this with the raid bosses. Again, the raid bosses aren't perfect, and there are a lot of changes I would make with them, but they're just nowhere near as difficult as people make them out to be. Like, I literally killed Dexy with the Actualizer as an afterthought in my Actualizer review video. And again, on the Borderlands 2 subreddit, I have seen people talk about Dexy like he's this insurmountable challenge. I've literally seen people compare him to Veracitus. And there's no way to think that unless you are very inexperienced with the fight. And yeah, if you're inexperienced, these fights are gonna be tough, guys. They're in OP10 raid bosses. They shouldn't be balanced so that, like, an average skilled player can waltz up to them and beat them on the first try. They should take a bit of practice. Which again is not to say that they're perfect, but, you know, they're just nowhere near as hard as people make them out to be. Except for like Hyperius and Veracitus. Anyway, Amigo Sincero, Rough Rider, let's see if I was spec. Oh, I used a Sniper Heart. Oh yeah, I was spec'd into Fearless. Alright, and here we are with the Axton side of the build. Again, just the Amigo Sincero is just such a great sniper. If you're not boosting your sniper damage with a relic, the Amigo Sincero is just going to be the best option. Now again, you could use a Muckamuck, a Skull Masher. Some people like the Hawkeye on Axton because he has a lot of base damage boosts and not a lot of crit damage boosts, so that's another good option. For bosses that can be easily sniped, the Amigo Sincero will be really good for them. And then we have a quad here. The quad is really good for bosses that are harder to crit, because you can just mag dump on them. You'll see I take out Captain Flynt like that. Especially with the Jakobs Allegiance relic, we get 3 shots off before having to reload, so that's really nice. Just a slag pimp for slagging. And then the Gatling gun. This is my favorite non-unique assault rifle. I like it the best on Zer0, but Axton can use it pretty effectively too. I did go ahead and give in a perfect one just because I really wanted to show it in the best light. The gemstone skin gives it 7.5% more crit damage, but a regular purple one is very good too. Again, just blockade and transfusion grenades here, which is just usually what I run if there's not something that specifically fits the theme of the build. I do switch over to the Rough Rider for the Pete kill, because you actually can. Raid bosses are just nowhere near as hard as people make them out to be in this game, and you'll see I solo Pete with an off-meta sniper Axton build, which if you went to the Borderlands 2 subreddit, people would think that you're, you know, a deranged maniac if you said that. But anyway, we can also switch over to some other grenades. The Quasar at times if you want, fastball. Axton is really good with the electric chair. I will link to Alpha's showcase of this. There's like a way you can sweet spot with it to kill an enemy really quickly. It can also kill yourself, so be careful. I'm not very good at it though. So I'll mostly be just using the longbow slag transfusion grenade, and then I used a specialist class mod. Unfortunately for Axton, he kind of got screwed with his class mods, in my opinion. Like, he has many viable class mods, but the legendary soldier is just almost always the best option in almost every single situation. So if you want to make this build better, just run the legendary soldier. I like to showcase variety. And, you know, I like to showcase builds that are good, but also a variety of builds, just to show people that this game has so much more build diversity than they think. So if you just want the build to be as good as possible, just take the soldier. But, you know, I'm going to do something a little bit more off meta, a little bit more fun, and we're just going to run the specialist. You can see it does give SMG accuracy, which is just such a weird passive. And then duty calls, ready, and forbearance. We'll go ahead and look at that. Just a Jakobs Allegiance relic again. Pretty much standard layout I take on this tree here. All of these skills are just really good. Axton has a good mix of basically all stat bonuses, health, shields, reload speed, just all this stuff. Onslaught is just a really good kill skill. Double up is just really good for slag utility. Able, you want to be managing your health on the harder difficulties. Able will help us do that. Expertise, I love this skill. It's one of my favorite skills in the game. If I have to choose between impact and expertise, I actually just prefer expertise. In this case, I took them both because overload and metal storm won't help as much. Now overload would help the Gatling gun, but I just prefer to take impact since I would get, you know, bonuses to everything and not just the Gatling gun. And then the Gatling gun will also benefit from impact as well. Metal Storm wouldn't really help these weapons. They don't really benefit from fire rate bonuses. And then Longbow, this is just good for 1 point. A Longbow and Do or Die are both good. Being able to throw grenades and fight for your life is nice. Being able to get back up with the fastball. But you honestly could move this point out. If you're just using the slag transfusion grenade and you don't get downed very much, you could move this point maybe into quick charge over here or forbearance. And then Battlefront, whenever your action skill is up, you do get more damage, so that is nice. And then 10 points on duty calls. This is a weird skill, but I did want to play around with it. At 10 points, we get plus 50% gun damage for non-elemental weapons. The fire rate is just a really strange decision because duty calls is going to synergize the best with Jakobs weapons, right? Because if you're not using a Jakobs weapon, you might as well just use an elemental version of that weapon. So giving it fire rate is just a really strange decision. I also wish the gun damage was higher. At 10 points, it's only 50%. Which, I mean, is not terrible, but non-elemental weapons really need some help to be as good on OP10. So I wish it could be like Critical Ascension, where it just gives gun damage and crit damage, or maybe magazine size or something, or maybe just a larger gun damage bonus. So it is a viable skill. It is fun because it does synergize with Jakobs Allegiance builds, but that fire rate bonus is just really strange. And again, the SMG accuracy on this comm is just so weird. Really, like I said, Axton kind of got screwed with his class mods in my opinion. I mean, he has a lot of good class mods. It's just the soldier is almost always the best, and then you just got weird stuff like this, which, I mean, I guess every character has some weird class mods, but Axton has this, and then like the shock trooper, which is just really weird. So, I mean, they're not bad, but there are some weird decisions there for sure. Preparation, again, you gotta be managing your health on the harder difficulties, and then healthy will be nice too. Now, since I am using the blockade, it gives you 35% damage reduction on OP10. and that does actually apply to your health, so that will help our health stretch a little bit further. If you find that you get downed a lot, or if you have a more aggressive playstyle, you can move these points into last ditch effort, which is really good for getting up from fight for your life. Or if you don't find either one of these to be that useful, you could take pressure. All of those are viable. This is not the only way to run this build. This is just, I'm kind of explaining my thought process here. 1 point in forbearance to activate the class mod. Dots are obviously one of the biggest threats on OP10, so this will be really good for that. Phalanx shield I actually really like. You can throw it, especially if you're using double turrets, you'll get 2 of them. You can throw it in front of you and stand behind the shield. Even if it only blocks a few high damage attacks, that's really nice. Quick charge, this is a really good kill skill. I did want to max out resourceful because I don't have cooldown rate from my class mod or my relic. Maglock for throwing my turret up on stuff. Maxed out grit, it's just a lot, it's just a fun skill. Again, if you find that you don't get downed a lot, or you just don't really care about this skill, you can move the points maybe into quick charge. Okay, so actually correction, you would have to at least put 4 points in this tree to move down the tree. So if you wanted, you could move 1 point out of grit into something else, but like I said, I just go ahead and take it, and the bar will be turned off, and we'll go ahead and get into the gameplay. Alright, here we are with the Axton gameplay. Like I said, I'm gonna do the run up to Captain Flynt here. I've got some Axton builds coming for Digistruct Peak, but for this video, I didn't want to do 2 Digi-Peak runs in one video, because the video's it's probably gonna end up being over an hour. But yeah, this beginning section is pretty tough, so I did want to do a build through here and show that it can deal with Boom Boom and Captain Flynt. They're some of the tougher mini-bosses in the game, especially because the turret, the cannon thing, can kill you through health gate. So definitely a pretty tough section, but this build will be good for dealing with bosses. For bosses, you can snipe, the Amigo Sincero can get them, and for bosses that are harder to crit, you can mag dump with the quad. But yeah, you can see people don't conventionally think of Axton as a sniper, but he can be plenty good with sniper rifles. The Amigo Sincero is really good. I mean, it's good on everybody. He can also do a good sniper setup with the Volcano and boost it with grenade damage. I actually soloed Dexy with the sniper Axton with the Volcano in that TD or Axton video. I'll link that if you guys want to check it out. Again, when snipers are so good for this game in most situations, there are some situations where sniping isn't good, but those are the exceptions. For most of the game, sniping is really, really good, and when you're using it as part of a normal build like this, ammo basically isn't a problem at all, because you can just swap to other weapon types, right? But you can see how fast the quad was able to take him out. Again, the cannon downed me, it can kill you through health gate, so you gotta be careful here. And then I don't really know of a better way to deal with Boom when he's in Big Bertha than to you just have to snipe him and kill him. You have to make sure you strafe to avoid the cannons and then just get headshots off as you can. If you guys have a better way to deal with him, let me know down below. But this is just the best way to kill him. It doesn't take that long, but it's a little bit hairy with the mobs attacking you and trying to avoid the cannon and the rack and stuff. It can be pretty difficult. So I also think that's part of the reason UVHM feels so hard at first is, I mean, not only is it the first, part of the game that treats you like you're capable of engaging with the tools at your disposal, the initial run-up to Captain Flynt is pretty tough, especially when you're coming in and you may not have a slag tool, or you may not, really understand a lot of the basics of the game, like element matching or proper building. So this part definitely can be tough. Another thing about sniping with Axton is if you throw the turrets really far away and then the enemies aggro on them, it can be kind of hard to snipe them because they won't be facing you. So if you're doing more of a sniper playstyle, I like to throw them closer to me so I can always be looking at the enemy and be able to crit them easier. Yeah, the Gatling gun, a really excellent AR, one of my favorites, probably my favorite non-unique AR. Some people like the spitter, some people like the minigun. And like I said, I did go ahead and give in a perfect Gatling gun just to see it in its best possible light. But I promise a regular non-gemstone one would work well too. Especially if you're using the legendary soldier, that would boost it more than the gemstone skin. Again, I just wanted to use the specialist comp for a bit of variety and a little bit of off-meta gear. But man, yeah, sniping's so good. You can see, this is what I mean about having a well-rounded build. You need your build to be able to take on all aspects of the game. You need a long-range option for enemies who hang back and stay away from you. You need a close-range option for when they rush you, stuff like that. A slag tool, a mid-range option, an alternate element option. That's why I love OP10, because it actually demands of you those things. And in my opinion, other Borderlands games just don't. And even on the highest difficulty, they are often just you running around with one weapon, demolishing everything. Which is not to say that the pre-sequel's a bad game, it's not. It is a great game, and I've played it a lot. But that is definitely one of the biggest things that prevents me from going back to it. And yeah, the Jakobs Allegiance relic, again, it is not one of the better Allegiance relics in my opinion, but you can see it is more than viable. You do really want to rely on the high damage Jakobs weapons to benefit from it. Especially since, again, you can't, get an element matching bonus with non-elemental damage top. Again, that's another change I would make. I would make non-elemental damage have 120% damage against health and shields, and 80% damage against corrosion. Against armor, I mean. Because that would allow non-elemental weapons to be more competitive with elemental weapons, but it wouldn't invalidate element matching. So there are several viable non-elemental weapons, but I just think it would be better if it worked that way, You kind of got to work hard to make them work, and they're still usually not as good as element matching. So I think just giving them that 20% damage bonus against health and shields would be a nice little perk for them. Because obviously they have the... Oh man, I was missing so many shots there. Obviously non-elemental damage has the advantage of being more consistent. But, I would have preferred that 20% extra damage. And the Gatling gun is just so fun to use. It was always one of my favorite weapons from the days that I first started playing the game and I didn't know anything about it. I was always excited to find a Gatling gun. Kind of a shame that there's not really a unique Gatling gun. I mean, I guess the Becca basically functions as one, but it feels a little bit different. But I guess on the other hand, it's nice to have some variety where, every non-unique weapon isn't power crept by a unique version. So again, I'm using the long-range capabilities of the build to take out these guys. Scavengers are really tanky. And then I'm just closing in, and then when I need to, I'll use the mid or close-range weapons. Oh yeah, again, I wasn't making a ton of use of my grenades. Again, you can do longbow slag transfusion for slag and healing utility. You can do quasar for disruption. I also like the slag singularity because it can give you that disruption, but then also slag enemies. So that's something you can do. If you use a high-level quasar or a high-level singularity, you got to be careful to not kill yourself with it. So for a low-level version, probably a low-level slag singularity would be better, because a low-level quasar is not going to be able to strip shields very effectively. And being able to disrupt enemies for just a second is really nice. Whenever you get into a situation where you're about to go down because an enemy has a direct line of sight on you or something, or they're just dealing a lot of damage, you can just throw that singularity grenade and get some nice disruption there so you can get to safety. So I like them a lot. And you can see what I mean about flank shield. Even though it can't soak up that much damage, just being able to hide behind it and shoot through it and stuff is still really nice. And I really like how the game changes over time. Like, obviously I've talked a lot about how people feel frustrated that Axton's turrets are better for killing enemies at a low level. But I think the game changes in a really interesting way, which is where early on, when the game is very easy, the turret just kills things and that's all there is to it. But as the game evolves, you start realizing that the turrets have all this utility, especially on the harder modes. So not only do they provide you aggro relief, they provide you slag utility, right? They can provide you disruption with the nuke attack, the nuke capstone. If you use 2, you get, double aggro disruption, double aggro relief, and you can get double flank shields. And then you also get the benefits from Battlefront, so you deal more damage when your action skill is up. So personally, I like the way that the game changes in that sense, and that his action skill gets a lot more nuanced than, you know, just throw it to kill enemies. So Captain Flynt can be a bit tricky if you're inexperienced, because there's quite a lot of mobs here. And then he does have immunity phases, which, I don't know why Gearbox loves immunity phases so much, man. I mean, I guess they feel like, for some enemies it's okay, it's just they overuse them, especially in Borderlands 3. I guess they feel like they provide some downtime to reset and stuff. But just how frequently they use them is a little annoying. I mean, it was too much in Borderlands 2, and then they doubled down on it in Borderlands 3. Just a little frustrating. But overall, I do like Captain Flynt as like a first tough mini boss. His arena is pretty cool. He's got the fire, which can kind of obscure him and stuff. I think you can only crit him. I'm pretty sure if you shoot him in the visor, you can crit him from the front. But after that, you can only crit him from the back of the head. So he is a bit of a tricky boss to introduce to players early on. So I can see why people would struggle with him. Now you can see once I get my turrets out and I can get my quad up in his face, I take him out really quickly. So that's what I should have been doing in the first place. I see right here how quick he dies from the quad. That's what I should have done originally. So good for bosses that you can't crit, you can just burst them down. Effective bossing on OP10 without the use of the B-Shield basically requires just good building, good aim, good strategy. And here I'm speaking of, not of raid bosses. For raid bosses, unless for some reason you're doing some sort of challenge run, you will want to use a B-Shield for them. But yeah, we're almost done here, and then we'll head on to Pyro Pete, because I do solo him also with Axton. And I guess I should clear something up. Whenever I do raid bosses in videos like this, I'm not like showing that this build is the best build or even a good build for raid bossing. It's more of just a challenge I'm doing for myself. For raid bossing with most characters, you do need specific setups in this game. And I think more casual players, they might come to YouTube and like search up good Axton build, hoping for something that will melt raid bosses. You know, you need specific gear and strategies for raid bosses, so that's not really... The builds I'm doing are good for most of the game, but not good for raid bosses typically. Now again, you can do challenge runs like this to deal with the raid bosses, but this is more of a challenge thing I'm doing to myself, and to show people that these raid bosses just aren't as hard as they think they are. Again, man, the Borderlands 2 subreddit, you should see the way they talk about raid bosses, dude. Like, their heads would split apart if you showed them a run like this, or in any of the challenge runs I've done. So you know what I just realized? I had the Rough Rider equipped with Zer0, but the legendary sniper must have been negating the bonus from it. Is that what happened there? I didn't even realize that was an interaction that could happen, because I don't remember it popping up with the Zer0 shield right here like it is with Axton. But if you guys want, I can do raiding videos with Maya and Axton. So again, there's 11 raids in this game, right? There's 10 raid bosses, and then there's Digistruct. All of the characters can beat most of the raids without glitches or exploits. Pretty much every character can beat Digistruct Peak, Vermi, Hatterax, Deciduous, Cromerax, Pete, and then I'm missing one. Who did I miss there? Did I say Vermi? Master Gee? I can't remember. I might have missed one. If I missed one, I'll put it up on screen. So all of the characters can beat like 7 of the 11 raids pretty easily. Now I say easily, it's going to be a challenge for sure, but you can practice and then you can consistently do it, right? Which is just fine. You know, you wouldn't want raid bosses on OP10 to be so easy that you can beat them without any practice. Like Dexy, the people who talk about him being as hard as Veracitus, he has one dangerous attack. He has the Poison Bomb attack, and you can pretty much completely 99% negate it with the Caustic Immune B-Shield. And if you don't have that, you can just avoid it or if you see you're about to be hit by it, you can switch to a caustic immune shield, or you can literally just cheese him by hiding under the bridge. So if you want to say that he's not an exciting enough fight, which is a take I agree with, I gave my thoughts on that in my rating video, I would agree with that. But, you know, a brutally difficult boss he is not, and this community seems to think he's like the second coming of Satan. But anyway, obviously this is not going to be a fast method for beating Pete with Axton, but you know, it's a challenge run, so I'm using silly stuff like a specialist class mod with, you know, a rough rider. But if you guys want, I can do some rating videos with Axton and Mai, even though I'm not an expert with them. Again, you don't have to be for 7 of the 11 raids. To, like, I think I mentioned this before, it's really only Terra, the Dragons, Hyperius, and Veracitus that are character specific. So those, it will depend on your character. Well, I mean, Hyperius and Veracitus are terrible. Like, I've never defended them. I've always acknowledged that Hyperius and Veracitus are as bad as the community says. But they're the only ones, and it's like most people only fought them and then developed all of their opinions about the raids from them, which is just very silly. There's just such a lack of nuance there. But Hyperius and Veracitus, yeah, they're cancer, they're horribly designed, they need completely reworked. Terramorphous and the Dragons are 2 of my favorite raids. They're really well designed, but they do need some adjustments, and they do depend on your character. They are character specific. I do think raiding is too punishing for solo players. I talked about that extensively in my Ancient Dragons farming video, so I won't rehash that now. But just the idea that you have to use glitches to beat most of the raids on most characters is just objectively, verifiably false. So like, I'm going to be doing raiding videos for Digistruct Peak, so that's one of them that I'll be doing with Axton and Mai. I've done some raids with them already, but if you guys want, I can do a video with them where I just beat all of the raid bosses except for those 4. So I'll have Digistruct Peak videos up that people can check out, and then I could do all of the raid bosses with them pretty easily, except for, you know, Terra, Dragons, Veracitus, and Hyperius. And I'm pretty sure they can still beat Terramorphous and the Dragons. It's just harder and takes more practice. Starkiller beat Terramorphous with Mai, I think. So I'll link to Starkiller's Mai raiding guide. Again, the Borderlands 2 subreddit needs to see that video, because they think that Mai, like, can't raid to save her life, which is just not true. I don't engage on that subreddit anyway. I don't think it would do any good to link my content to those types of people, because, again, they'll always have some kind of reason to discount it. I mean, like I said, like I mentioned about Killer 6, but I don't want to get back into that. But anyway, you can see this is taking a long time because, again, this is not a meta strategy. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that it takes a bit of time and effort to solo an OP10 raid boss with no badass rank with an off-meta build. It's perfectly acceptable that it takes a bit of time to do so. But you can see what I mean. Sometimes the turrets will like mess with the enemy's AI and they just get confused and they'll stop moving, or they'll wander around like they're lost. So that can be a bit annoying. Axton does end up, or not Axton, Pete does end up bugging out whenever he's almost dead and he just freezes in place. I'm not sure if the turret placement did that or something. But I didn't want to redo the fight, so I just went ahead and counted it. I mean, I had almost killed him anyway, so it didn't really matter. This was not a super great run, but you know, it was enough to get the job done, and that's all you need. But yeah, even though I'm not the best Axton player or the best Mai player, I could pretty easily do most of the raids with them. Digipeak. Let's just start from the beginning. Digipeak, Vermivorous, Pyro Pete, Deciduous, Cromerax, Hatterax. There's still one that I'm missing, damn it. Okay, I'm just going to pause this and look it up because that's really irritating me. Okay, yeah, I think it was Master Gear. But yeah, even though I'm not the best player with them, I could beat 7 of the 11 raids with just a modicum of practice. Digipeak, Vermivorous, Master Gear, Pyro Pete, Deciduous, Cromerax, and Hatterax. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, sorry about ranting about that so much, guys. As you can see, I've been a bit irritated lately, so hopefully that didn't spill over into the video too much. Definitely need to take a chill pill today. So yeah, like I said, if you wanted to use a more optimized version of this build, you could throw on the B shield and a legendary soldier, and that would go a lot faster. Obviously, Axton can just B-hawk this fight, and that would probably be the fastest method for victory. But yeah, I mean, there are many modifications I would make to the raid bosses. It's just the difficulty of them is massively overstated, and you know, they absolutely do not have to be glitched. Not most of them, and not for most characters anyway. Again, it's sort of like the community only fought Veracitus and Hyperius and based their entire game knowledge off of those fights. Most of the raid bosses, it's actually not as difficult to avoid their attacks. Like, that's another thing people complain, that raid bosses, you can never avoid their attacks. Again, that's mainly only for Hyperius and Veracitus. For the other ones, it's fairly easy to avoid their attacks. I mean, not easy, but you can do it. I mean, they're raid bosses, guys. They shouldn't be super easy to avoid their attacks. I would have to evaluate on a case-by-case basis, but they really aren't that bad. Like Terramorphous, obviously the double health gating Novas from Hyperius and Veracitus is just horrible game design. Which I don't even know if you can call that bad game design. It's intentionally malicious. Like, they did that on purpose, knowing that it was just a dick move. So I don't even know if bad game design is the right word, but it's definitely asshole game design. Then like Terramorphous, like, people say that one spot is a glitch spot. Did Gearbox ever say it was a glitch spot? I don't understand why the community decided it was a glitch spot. Could be just something I'm totally ignorant about. But it really just seems like cover. Like, hopefully the Borderlands community isn't so bad at using cover that they think that standing behind something is a glitch. It really seems intentional, because why would you accidentally put the perfect cover spot right there? Then also, it only blocks some of Terramorphous' attacks from some angles. Like those attacks where the tentacles throw flying rocks in the air, it is as if they are perfectly designed to come in over that cover spot and knock players out of it. And also, Terramorphous can move, and a lot of the tentacles can spawn on the other side and hit that spot. So, to me, I don't consider it a glitch spot. It adds to the fight at the end of the day, so whether it was intentional or not, it should be considered a good legitimate part of the fight. I was playing very badly here. I kept getting hit by Novas. Not my finest performance, but more so than anything, it just proves that, you know, you don't have to be a god to do these runs. That's another thing, like, if you were to show some of those people, like my rating video, and to show that you don't have to use glitches, a lot of them are just going to say, okay, yeah, it's only possible if you're super good at the game, but it's not possible if you're a low or average skill player. Which, again, really weird that you want the hardest content on the hardest difficulty to be balanced for low skill players, but whatever. Now, yeah, you do have to be really good to solo OP10 raids, legitimately, but, you know, that's perfectly acceptable. And I would change a lot of things about them. Like, honestly, if it was up to me, the B shield would just never have existed, and the raid bosses would just have much lower health to compensate. I think that would be a much better way to do it. Now, the way that it works now is basically the B shield is what gives solo players a fighting chance against the raid bosses. So it's not the worst system in the world. But for me personally, I just prefer the B never existed, which I think would have been better for the community anyway. And then they could lower the raid boss health, and I think it would just work out better in the long run. Borderlands 3 overall, it's definitely too easy in a lot of the ways I've already mentioned, but it did do some things really well. One of the best things about Borderlands 3 was how many different great synergies the Vault Hunters have. Part of that is because it's just got so much stuff, it has so many skills and unique gear, there's more opportunities for synergies. Because the Vault Hunters have 4 skill trees each, and they all have a ton of skills in them, right? So the Vault Hunters are really strong, and they have a lot of synergies. Basically, I think that you should just have to really know your character, be really good with them, to be able to take on raid bosses. That's what I would like. So Borderlands 2 has definitely overtuned the raid bosses in a lot of ways, and like I said, they are too punishing for solo players. I've made these points a lot of times, so I don't want to rehash that too much. And there are definitely great things about the way Borderlands 3 handled its raid bosses, or its raid level content. My point is not that these raids are perfect, it's just they are nowhere near as difficult as people make them out to be. Except for, like, again, like Hyperius and Veracitus. So again, I took another Nova. I just was not playing good this run. Which again, just shows that you can still do it even if you're not the best player, or if you're not playing your best. And every time, like, I really like the Pete fight, it's a lot of fun. Even though it's an easier fight. You know, that's another thing. I don't think everything should always just have to be super difficult. Pete is difficult enough to still be fun, so I still like him. Every time you get hit by a Nova and you open one of those waterfalls, the minions will increase in level. So I was being really sloppy here getting hit this much. That was not a good play on my part. But I was still able to get the job done. I think I ended up downing myself right here. Yeah, see, he jumped in front of me and I self-damaged. So self-damage is one of the few things that can kill you through health gate. And then see, at this point, I don't know what happened to Pete, but he bugged out. So I just went ahead and killed him. I had almost finished him off, so I'm not redoing the fight for that. Again, this is a very buggy game, as we all know. But, you know, I still love it. It doesn't hurt my enjoyment of the game very much. So, yeah, there's two really good Jakobs Allegiance builds. I'm going to put best in the title, I think. I don't know about using the word best because I don't necessarily go for the best stuff all the time. But I think it would be an algorithm-friendly title, so I will experiment with that. But again, guys, sorry for about stuff so much if that was super irritating, but, you know, it's super irritating for me just being a part of this community that is so full of this kind of misinformation and bad takes. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Have a good day and hope to see you next time. Bye, guys.